Hi, this is Kate. Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to interview Shirley Thiessen, who actually put together an amazing workshop in curriculum and materials that helps Christians come along and empathize with people who are grieving. This is a fantastic case study for seeing what we can do as course creators to help improve when people take action on what they've learned. Because what we see is, though, what she's created is great. And it sounds like she has a lot of people who do what she's advocating. But in some cases, people go through it and say, this is really great, but they don't take action. So listen into this whole thing. And at the end, I'm going to summarize some tips that we have for helping people see themselves as being able to sometimes do the uncomfortable thing. Here we go. Thanks for being with us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your program?
I have experienced a devastating loss of losing my son, Jordan, almost 10 years ago. And so what happened there was I realized that before my son died, I did not know how to come alongside my grieving friends. It wasn't until I saw my friends come alongside our family and demonstrate in living color what it was like to express empathy in creative ways that I was like, how come I didn't know this? And so my course is meant to equip people like the younger me who just feel uncertain about how to come alongside your grieving friend, and to give some confidence to know that actually these ideas are really simple and they have such an impact. And so I just want to equip others as I wish I had been.
I think it's pretty awesome when people go through difficult times and then they use that as a way to reach back and help people go through that same difficulty. I think that's one of the things I really, really love about courses, and it just allows other people to kind of benefit from our hard-earned wisdom.
Yes.
I know you've prepared a couple of letters that are from who you'd anticipate to be your clients going through this program that you would create. The first one is coming from somebody who really wants to be a part of your program. Why don't you go ahead and read that for us?
Well, dear Shirley, when my best friend lost her mom to cancer, my heart was broken for her loss. But after the funeral and sending a card, flowers, I didn't know what to do. It's been over a year now, and my friend is so different from the person that I once knew. I don't understand her grief. And every time I try to cheer her up, she seems to become more agitated and kind of ends a conversation and goes home. It bothers me that I can't seem to offer any comfort in a way that means something to her. I need your course. I can't believe stuff like this isn't taught in school, because grieving people are everywhere. And I have this guy at work on my team. We're working on an important client project. And recently I found out that he is grieving the loss of his unborn child. His wife miscarried a baby they were so looking forward to having. It happened just a month before the due date. The doctors have no idea what went wrong. And no one on our team wants to talk about this. But grief is obviously disrupting his ability to concentrate and contribute to this project. So it feels like there's this elephant in the room that no one is willing to talk about, and yet it's adversely affecting our project. I need to know, how can we walk with this teammate? How can we make it better? And how can we express empathy?
That's really beautiful. It's so clear what her, I'm assuming it's a her. Her issue is that she wants to make a difference in the lives of her friends and just feels very powerless to do so.
Yes.
It's a very clear picture of where she is currently. I think in some of the parts of the letter, you actually kind of allude to some of the things that she's doing wrong and doesn't realize it, which I think is really, really great. It's one of the reasons that I like this assignment. And the other thing that you see is her motivations, like why it's important for her to take your course. So go ahead and read the second letter. This is the same person, and she has successfully finished your course, and she's seen a difference in her life.
Dear Shirley, it's true when people say you don't know what you don't know. With my friend, I've learned that it's not my job to fix her loss or try to cheer her up. My presence is most important. Sharing her tears, sharing memories of her mom. She's really opened up to me once I started expressing empathy and giving her permission to talk about her loss without judging her or projecting onto her what I think her grief journey should look like. And your course gave me courage to ask the guy at work to tell us about his unborn baby girl. Like, what name were they going to give her? And how was their 3-year-old son handling losing his little sister? It seems like my coworker had been waiting for permission to open up about his pain. Our team took him out for coffee just to listen. What a game changer that was. Suddenly he's contributing more and our team is pulling in the same direction with creativity. Empathy accelerates trust, I've learned. It is the untapped advantage of healthy relationships. The things I learned from this course are applicable to every kind of loss. I feel so much smarter. People at work are asking me how I seem to know what to say or what to do. I pretend that I know these things intuitively, but that would be an exaggeration. I learned them from your course.
I love it. Now, what that one does is it kind of sees how that has changed her life and like how she's been able to use it to pass on her companionship. I'm not exactly sure what you would describe it, because you're right. She's not trying to fix them. She's not trying to heal them. She's just trying to be there. It's really, really beautiful. Now, what I didn't hear in that second letter is what she had to overcome in order to shift that. And that's fine. It doesn't have to be in there. But sometimes that gives us a clue about what types of barriers to expect when we're putting together a course. Like, what causes somebody to struggle in exchange what they might currently believe about grieving in this case versus what they can learn, have an open mind about grief. So what false beliefs do they have to give up? I think we can kind of allude to it in saying that she was trying to cheer them up instead of just allowing it to be. So maybe the false belief is that we should just be happy about everything.
Right. When people say, well, just good vibes only, or, oh, come on, it's not that bad. Or at least you had your mom for, 32 years. Like, that is us projecting onto someone that, it's look for the sunshine, look for the silver lining. And when in real life, it means we need people to just say, this is awful. I am so sorry that you've lost your mom. This is not fair. It's unjust. And I hurt with you. That's a completely different paradigm shift.
Yeah, I think it is. I think there is almost this fear of being caught into a negativity for too long. And we don't want that for our friends. So we want to rescue them.
Right. And yet we don't realize that by just sitting with them in that pain, that actually gives them hope to actually look for a better day, that that grief and loss will actually help to dissipate just by acknowledging the pain.
Yeah. And I was thinking of the verse that says, hope deferred makes a heart sick. And just thinking of, like, if you try to repress some of those difficult things and just pretend like it's sunshine and roses, you're not able to grasp that hope.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't want to hang around people who are always negative, but at the same time, I feel there's some disingenuous portions of people when they're always up and they're not admitting what hurts and what's their pain point.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, God created us with a variety of different emotions. And even like with music, when you hear music, it has different sounds, even in the same piece. It'll have quieter and louder portions and stuff. How boring is life if it's always at one volume, at one note? I feel like it's
exactly
high. That is so boring.
The lows really help us appreciate the highs.
So I know you've helped a lot of people in the last 10 years. What do you see in someone that kind of makes you know that they had an aha moment and their perspective on grief may have shifted, maybe even before they realized it themselves?
I had this idea that grief is wrapped up in a year. And I think in society, most people think there is a timeline for grief. But when someone comes to realization that, oh my goodness, this is a lifelong of reconciling to this reality of this loss, that is a big aha moment for many people. And sometimes it's a shock when they go, wow, this is more than I thought. This is This is huge.
I think you're right. Even I think like maybe your moods kind of stabilize after a certain period of time, but you're right. The adjustment to the loss is lifelong.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we talked about this a little bit in our initial call, and we talked about how a lot of people want to do the right thing. So they have often a checklist of everything I need to do when my friend is grieving. So I've sent them the card, I showed up at the funeral. And then there's other people who are able to show genuine empathy. I think when you are in a position where you have a friend who's someone significant for your friend passes away, you feel bad for them. Okay, so I feel bad for that friend. What's the difference between feeling bad for them and, following the checklist and truly having empathy?
I think you're describing sympathy versus empathy. And sympathy is more like a passive pity. It's like, I feel concerned for you, but I'm not going to get involved. I'm going to keep you at an arm's length. A feeling for someone. Empathy is feeling with someone. It's saying, I hurt with you. I don't understand your pain necessarily, but I'm affected by it and I am with you. You are not going to grieve alone. And so that is kind of the distinction. And, even yesterday, I got a text from a friend who has this beautiful habit of texting me every 18th of the month. So my son died on October 18th, 2012. And my friend Corrine has sent me a text on the 18th day of every month, January to December, for nearly 10 years. And she remembers Jordan with me. She might share a verse, a prayer, a thought, just expressing that she remembers that this is a huge pain in my life, a huge gap in my life. And she acknowledges it and expresses her love in a simple text. But wow, what an example of empathy. And it is off the charts. And so by her example, I might not text somebody every month, but certainly on like an anniversary or birthday of that loved one who's died, I try to be intentional about that. And I think people who are empathetic, they keep looking for ways to acknowledge the loss. And that might mean just bringing up the name of a loved one and saying, what do you miss about Jordan today? Wow, I love that question. That's empathy.
That's amazing. I had never thought of doing anything like that.
I hadn't either. I've learned everything from my own caring grief companions.
When you've opened up in this interview, you kind of alluded to that. And I thought that was beautiful because it's not just like you're teaching how you wanted to be treated. It's almost like you're sharing the way people have treated you. And that worked really well. Ways that people have loved you through a lot of this.
Oh, exactly. And, I'm still in shock. How come I didn't know this? How come, and some people, it is rather intuitive for some. But I think for the majority of us, we need to be taught. We need to be coached into, here's some things that you can do that are really helpful. Mm-hmm. And by the way, here's some things that you must avoid. And I think people respond well to that because we're well-meaning. We want to be caring, but sometimes the fear of doing the wrong thing keeps us from doing anything.
Oh my gosh, that's so right. Do you think that parents could do a better job overall in raising their kids to acknowledge and walk friends through grief? Now, I'm not sure that children generally always have the opportunity to do that because they don't maybe feel it as nearby. Like I happen to have, when I was 10, a friend who died at 10. And so I remember that, but I think that's pretty unusual.
Well, you think about it from a child's perspective. If they are old enough to love, they are old enough to grieve. They might love that goldfish that died and it's catastrophic to them, or a beloved pet, a cat or a dog, or a grandparent or a friend just moves away or decides they don't want to be friends anymore. To a child or an adult, that is a huge and devastating loss. Mm-hmm. And so if I were to go back to when I was a young parent with my kids, I would definitely want to be teaching them about empathy, about how to express love and concern for someone, to imagine what it's like to put themselves in that place of how that pain must feel for their friend. Mm-hmm. And I believe we parents would do a great service to their children by teaching them that, because if we are just teaching them to, just kind of suck it up, buttercup, it's going to be fine, and just distracting them. I think as a parent, I often distracted my kids from pain saying, well, okay, let's go make some cookies and let's do something fun and forget about the pain, instead of letting them actually feel that with them and then acknowledging it and then moving through it. Because I think a lot of anxiety in our young people today could be stemmed to the fact that there's unresolved grief in their life, that they've not been permitted to actually acknowledge those emotions that they've had.
That's really, really good. And so we have a secondary product for you to do eventually, and that is helping your children become caring, compassionate.
Hope heroes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I call them hope heroes because you're lending hope to someone who feels like their hope is just leaking out. Yeah. They can't imagine a better day, and you are believing for them. You're extending your faith to them. And that is a powerful transformational thing.
That's great. I actually have a coach who would talk about her belief systems and the beautiful beliefs she has about herself and about her friends. And she says, come in and borrow my beliefs anytime you want. If you're all that great, like I am unlovable. She's like, you can have free reign at any of my beliefs if you want to take them and, borrow it for yourself.
I love that. I love that. And really, that's what a hope hero does. It says, I know right now you cannot hold on to hope. You feel like you don't have any. I have enough for both of us. Mm-hmm. And so I am extending that to you.
That's awesome. So tell me a little about how you are sharing your class. Are you doing this as like a Bible study, small groups, online classroom? What are our options?
Kind of all of the above. So this is something that is available online for families to do, mm-hmm. which I believe, because I've taught these concepts to school children as young as grade 4, and I've seen how receptive they are to the concepts, I believe that's a good age to start, if not earlier. So families could do this, or a group of girlfriends or couples. I've seen couples do this together, different walks of life. It doesn't really matter because grief is relevant to all of us. So there's really no one for whom it doesn't apply. Mm-hmm. I would love to see this done in workplaces where teams do this together, to have a common language around what it means to express empathy. I mean, it would be a mistake to think that grief does not affect our workplaces. It absolutely does. I remember a lady telling me that she had lost her son, and no one at work really acknowledged her pain. They would never talk about her son or how she was feeling. She would have to arrive at work a half an hour early, sit in the parking lot, and have a good cry before she could go enter the building. And I thought that is so isolating, and that just compounds the grief. And so workplaces and families and Bible studies and churches, there's just so many applicable groups.
What challenges, if any, are you having in the actual curriculum or groups or anything like that?
The groups that have gone through it have just given some amazing feedback, and I love that. But I am a little bit surprised by the reluctance. Some groups that go, you know what, that's good, but they never quite follow through. What you value, you will prioritize. Help people to understand how important this is. I thought the pandemic and all the grief and loss that happened through that would escalate or highlight that for people. And I believe truly it's opened up more conversation, but to actually take action and do the course, which is not long. It's like 2 hours of content organized into 5 easy to digest videos. Mm-hmm. And it's not a big commitment, but it is an important one. And so I'm a little surprised at the lack of follow through.
Why do you think that they aren't following through?
I have no idea, really. I mean, some just kind of keep deferring it and say, yeah, absolutely, we want to do it. And then defer it. Right now, we can't do it. And that kind of goes on and on. Maybe way down deep, people are still uncomfortable with the topic of grief and death and loss. Because when you start talking about that, you have to face your own mortality. And we live in a death-denying, grief-avoidant society. And it's uncomfortable.
Have you ever had yourself or had somebody else send a message or a card or a text message or something along that lines to somebody who is grieving and have them say, back off, I don't want your help, I don't need your sympathy?
No, they haven't said that, but they have been unresponsive.
Do you think there might be a fear that if I send this text, maybe it won't be welcome?
Oh, for sure. But you know what? I think sometimes we have to get over ourselves, right? We just think you're thinking too much about how this is going to affect you. And you kind of have to let go of offenses with those who are grieving. Because I remember I kind of lost all common courtesies when my son died. I was just so fixated on my sorrow that just even thanking people for things or responding in a timely way, I couldn't care less. And so I know people could have easily given up on me and said, oh, well, she didn't respond to that text or that call. So I tried, I'm out of here. But those people who are courageous enough to consistently keep trying and extend love and grace, gradually you can respond to that.
If they're not taking action, first of all, I'd want to know why. Why are they not taking action? Because right now you and I can assume reasons why people might not want to take it or might not want to take action. But if you can get a hold of anybody who sent you the report, oh, it's good information, we didn't do anything with it, can you reach out to them and say, hey, I'm curious to set up a talk? So that would actually help you create content that would address those feelings. So if we know for sure after talking to them that they don't want to send a text because they're afraid that somebody's going to brush them off or be unresponsive, that's part of the assignment that you give them. I want you to send a text. I want you to think of somebody who's grieving something right now because we're going to practice this skill. They might not respond, and that's okay, because if somebody is truly grieving, they may not be acting in a very civil manner. They might be freaking out in many, many ways. And we can love them despite how they respond to us. And so I want you to send this text anyway, and you might not get a response, but that's okay. If you don't get a response, or if you do, send a text next week, send a text in 4 weeks. Let them know that they aren't forgotten.
Exactly.
But if you're setting up these assignments, number one, they're very action oriented, and you're telling them, I need you to do this. God needs you to do this. You need you to do this because it's the right thing to do. When Jesus talks about the wise man versus the foolish man, the wise man built his house on the rock and the foolish man built his house on the sand. The difference between the two is the action they took, because Jesus specifically says that the foolish man heard the teachings and didn't put them in action. The wise man heard the teachings and did the actions. He actually built his house on the rock. So if somebody can sit through your class and hear these words and be the foolish man who doesn't take action. So I think that's what I would want to address, is like giving them achievable action steps and focusing on the reasons why they wouldn't and pressing them to do it. You can also, and I'm not a big fan of it, but it is a good help for somebody who maybe feels like I don't know the right words to say, is to give them templates if you don't already. Here are 10 things you could text or write in a sympathy card, or don't send a sympathy card, make your own card,
Yeah.
Write that letter out. It's going to be a lot more meaningful. Mention a memory, so that way they're still doing a checklist. It's not so difficult, but it's taking empathy point of view, not sympathy. Do you think that could help maybe improve some of the action steps that people take, or is this something you're already doing?
Yeah, they're definitely in the course where very simple things, like I talk about 4 steps that a hope hero takes. And the first one is listen. And, we live in such a noisy world. I kind of unpack that. Things like, do you track with them? Do you ask them, even when they pause, are you comfortable with that silence? Because for a griever, sometimes it's very difficult even to put the words together to express their heart. So, what is it like to create a safe place for someone to actually talk about their loss where you can listen? And then the next step is acknowledge the loss. So what does that look like? It's really just validating their sorrow as worthy of your empathy and compassion. My friends did so many amazing things. I'm actually wearing a necklace that was made specifically for me with Jordan's name on it. And it was a beautiful way for my friend to acknowledge my pain and say, when you wear this, you remember how much I care and love your family. And what a beautiful thing. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a gift. It can be just sharing a memory of my son that they remember. Like, that's beautiful. So those are different ways we acknowledge. And so I give some very practical, I give a lot of stories and examples. And then the third one is pray. I used to think, the younger me, that, well, of course I'm going to pray. Like, God, please comfort my grieving friend. But it wasn't until I was ambushed by my own grief and loss that I realized grief affects every part of your life. So physically, I felt like I was in an emotional concussion. I couldn't handle bright lights. Noises were too loud. I couldn't track people in conversations. I couldn't multitask anymore. I felt like I was 90 years old. My legs were weighted. Simple tasks were just way too much. You can feel like you're going crazy. And so there's a physical aspect that we can pray for them, a spiritual aspect that they will turn to God and not away from him when they're in pain. Relationships change. Like my husband and I grieve completely different. And that could have been a big fracture in our marriage. And so praying for the relationships and for that griever. And then also praying just for their ability to hold on to hope and not give up. So many people are still functioning in society, but they have lost their purpose. They've lost any meaning. And that breaks my heart. And so just praying all those things. And then the last step is patiently be present. And again, coming back to this thing that grief is not something that's not an event that is kind of wrapped up with a finish line. It is a life-altering experience. And so don't project onto someone else what you think their grief should look like. There's people that I know who have been told by close relatives, please don't talk about her anymore. Or why do you have her pictures on the wall? You should be past that. That is so cruel. And so just understanding what it means to patiently be present. And so those are 4 very clear, actionable steps that I want people to be equipped with. So they feel confident to know how to be a hope hero.
Would you have any sort of goals maybe, or ways for them to recognize that they were like successful, like setting up a coffee and meeting with your friend? Like that might be a goal.
Yeah. Just recently, a friend of mine said, oh my goodness, this stuff works. I just invited my grieving neighbor. I said, we're going to go for a walk. I'm going to buy you a latte, and I just want to listen to you talk about your loved one. That's all I did. And they got this amazing text the next day saying, thank you. I finally felt like it was a safe place to really share my shattered heart. And so when people come back and go, oh my goodness, like this works, it is so exciting. Yeah, it just makes me want to think, oh, I wish more and more people would latch onto it, because our world would feel like a kinder, more compassionate place.
Another thing that can help with some action steps that I was thinking of is having testimonials of your hope heroes talking about maybe the first time they set up a coffee. How did you feel when you set up the coffee? Were you afraid when you texted your friend? Were you afraid when you sat down? Were you afraid that like you were going to say the wrong thing? And then how did it turn out compared to what you expected? Because those have a very, very good way of helping the person who's going through your course and visualizing themselves. Like I can relate with somebody who had all the fear, who wasn't sure if they were going to be the right person. Like maybe her other friends will help, like I'm not all that important. But I think that would help them overcome maybe some of the hesitation they might have to see other people succeed and how it turned out in the end.
Absolutely. As a griever, one of the secret sauce to my own healing has been serving others. And so I'm even encouraging people who are raw in their own pain to look up and look out for someone else who is hurting. And so I actually had a recent widow who said, I have this friend, she's more of an acquaintance, and she just lost her husband. And even though I'm new in my own loss, I decided I was going to take her out for coffee and just let her talk about her husband. And she goes, even though I should be more confident about that, I had all this anxiety that I was going to trigger something for this newer widow. But she said, I took her out and my acquaintance talked for 2 hours about her husband. And I just felt such joy in knowing that I was helping to carry this burden of loss with her by simply being present and listening. And she said, it actually gave me confidence to do it again with someone else. And so I love those kind of reports because it's a both and. It's a blessing that you extend, but it comes back to bless you.
Absolutely. I think that is so true. I am working right now on a course for a client, and we're talking about a topic of spreading joy and peace and all that type of stuff. And one of the activities that I created is where you write out a card that compliments somebody or appreciates something about them that is awesome. This is such a double blessing because the person who receives it is great. But what a blessing to write those cards out for other people too, to stop and say, I appreciate this aspect of you. It is truly more blessed to give than to receive. You know, receiving all those cards is great, but making all those cards, that makes you into the type of person who spreads love and appreciation. So
absolutely. Absolutely. And, that actually reminds me of something, because my son was one of those people that wrote cards all the time. He would express his affirmation in all the white parts of the card. He would fill it up with his own handwriting. And, part of my grief process has been to take some of the best parts of him and be that for other people. And so sending cards has been one of the things that I've tried to be more intentional about doing, about encouraging someone else. And you're right, it has been a huge blessing to me.
Awesome. So I think that this particular set of courses, actually, you have so many different things you can do with this particular topic, and so many people who need to hear this. I think this is some interesting ways to consider, like how to get somebody to take action and see themselves as succeeding. And it is definitely another opportunity to send a blow to fear.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So much of our growth is around, putting fear to putting an end to fear in certain areas. Fear certainly keeps us from a lot of growth. And I find it fascinating that your friend who's a recent widow would find the same type of fear as somebody who's not experienced that. Like I would totally, like, my fear is justified because I have not been a widow.
Yes. Isn't that interesting?
That's fascinating. I would not expect that.
I know. And she said, I should know better. Like, I've been there, but she just thought, well, everyone does grieve differently, right? And the things that maybe resonate with one person doesn't resonate with another. But so she was afraid that, something she would do would not be received well. But oh my goodness, you just invite someone to talk about their loved one. That is such a gift that very few people extend that gift. And so even though they weren't close friends, they were only acquaintances, there was a safety that she provided in saying, I'm genuinely interested. Tell me about him.
That's beautiful. Well, I think we covered a lot of ways we can think about, like, how we can encourage people to take action for their own benefit. I think that is actually one of the cool things about courses is people sign up for a course because they want to become this person who reaches out. And it's so interesting that they hear all this stuff about how to do it and then sometimes don't. It sounds like a lot of people that you have that go through it also do it. So there's plenty of people who are changed as a result. Thank you so much for being with me. And it was such a pleasure to hear about Jordan and how his passing has changed your life.
Well, thank you for the invitation. This is a topic that very few are courageous enough to open up. And I really appreciate you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. It was great talking to Shirley about her course. If you ever want to get a hold of Shirley and see what she has available, please check the links below. And if you want to get a hold of me, my links are there as well. Be sure to like and subscribe.